Joining me now, Sabrina Singh, former Deputy Press Secretary at the Pentagon. It's good to see you, Sabrina. Lots to get into. So, first of all, were you surprised to see military transport planes in the deportation effort?
Look, what you're seeing with our military forces is they are being used in support of DHS and Border Patrol as we are surging troops to the border to assist in these efforts. It's really at the discretion of the lead agency, and apparently DHS has identified that our aircraft can be used to help transport migrants back. Look, is this a good use of resources? We've already seen from the past, late last year, migration numbers going down at the border. And again, to surge, an additional 1,500 troops to the border, you're pulling those troops out of training and going to impact readiness in the long term. So is this a good use of our military forces and their assets? That's what this administration has determined. Don't necessarily agree with that path, as we've seen migration numbers clearly going down in the last year, but that is their decision that they've made.
So one of the president's executive orders sent 1,500 troops to the border with plans for a surge of up to 10,000. But there are laws on how active duty military can be used on U.S. soil. So how involved can the military get? Can they make arrests? Can they join ICE raids? What can they actually do while at the border other than, as you've described, be in support of actions?
Well, I think that's the most important point here, is that right now the U.S. military is being used in support of those efforts. And we saw that in the statement issued by the acting Secretary of Defense before Pete Hegseth was confirmed earlier or yesterday, but sworn in today. Look, there are very strict laws regarding how the U.S. military is used domestically, and they cannot be used in an enforcement capacity. There can be carve-outs at times, but again, that's not the role of the U.S. military. The U.S. military is there really to protect our interests overseas, to work with our allies and partners. And at a time like this, where you have the ongoing war in Ukraine, you have the crisis still waging in the Middle East. And then, of course, everyone is always keeping our eye on what China is going to do. There are a lot of crises and issues that are going to confront this administration. And by pulling forces away from their missions and sending them to the border for something that really doesn't require their support, that is going to impact the force long term.
Okay, so I want to drill down to that. When you say they can't be enforced for law enforcement, what can they absolutely not do? Give us an example.
It really comes to the authorities of how they're being used. There is a law called Posse Comitatus that bars active duty troops from domestic law enforcement without authorization. So things like arrest, you're not going to see, our U.S. military going down and kicking in doors. They are there in support of DHS and Customs and Border Patrol. So what, like you saw with flight capacity, helping set up logistics points, things like that are more in a logistical support way and less in the law enforcement way that you're seeing the Customs and Border Patrol do in their usual capacity.
Okay. So Pentagon officials Monday took down a portrait of now retired Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley. The Times quotes a U.S. official saying, quote, the White House ordered it removed. Sabrina, how unusual is this? And what are you hearing about how folks at DOD are reacting? Is it being seen as anything but a petty move by Donald Trump?
How unusual is this? I think there's certainly many things that are unusual about how this administration is already coming in, but, we shouldn't be surprised. I think Donald Trump came in and said he was going to go after those who stood against him. It's really unfortunate. Chairman Milley is someone that served in uniform for over 40 years, served this country faithfully. Taking down his portrait in the hallway of the Joint Chiefs, I'm not sure what type of message that sends to the force. There's a lot of crises all around the world right now. The incoming secretary is going to have to confront those head on. Going to have to brief the president on how our forces are being used, how our force posture needs to change. Taking down a portrait, other than being symbolic, I'm not really sure what that adds or how that makes our force more lethal and capable around the world.
Have you heard anything from any of your former Pentagon colleagues about how this is being perceived inside the DoD?
Look, of course, it's going to hit morale, but I think you have men and women in uniform in our civilian workforce that are not going to let that distract from their mission. They're going to keep doing the work every single day. I know there are folks right now in that building continuing on with the mission that they're assigned, because all around the world, they are needed at all times. So they're not going to let this distract from that. It's unfortunate, but they're going to continue to carry on.
Pete Hegseth, now sworn in as Secretary of Defense, confirmed in that 50-50 tie vote that was broken by Vice President Vance. One of the president's executive orders this week puts an end to diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, which Hegseth also opposed. How do you expect this to impact military operations?
Well, look, I think that remains to be seen. The incoming secretary is going to, be taking a look at some of these programs. I think what's really important here is when we're talking about these DEI initiatives, I'm curious on exactly what that means to them. If you're talking about an hour of training versus, the 80 hours of rifle work or marksmanship that an average soldier has to go through, I think let's put things in perspective. But again, this is a promise that the Trump administration came in on, and they're going to have to address that throughout the force. I think what's important here is our men and women in uniform are the best there is in the world. And so they're going to continue to stay focused on that mission and not let that detract from their mission.
I want to just get an opinion from you, given your position as the former Deputy Press Secretary at the Pentagon. You have watched what it takes to be the Secretary of Defense here in the DoD. Do you think Pete Hegseth has what it takes to do the job?
Well, look, I think something that's very concerning is how he ran some of his nonprofits and businesses. I mean, the Secretary Hegseth now is responsible for a workforce of nearly 3 million people and a budget of nearly $1 trillion. If past is any indication of what the future could hold, mismanaging funds and American taxpayer dollars, that's very serious. I think senators on the Hill had their concerns. I think there are concerns certainly that I have. But look, he is now the Secretary of Defense. He has a lot of work ahead of him. And I hope that he relies on the civilian workforce and those who are in uniform that know that building, that have served, a very long time in the military to help guide him through some of the challenges that he's going to face.
We will be watching very closely with your help as well. Sabrina Singh, good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alex.
Well, we're coming down to just 1 week. That's right, 1 week, and the Democratic National Committee members will get to vote on a new chair. Oh, it's so exciting. Can you feel it in the air? It's electric. It's electric. The newest entrant in the race is Faz Shakir. He is the campaign manager for Senator Bernie Sanders' 2020 presidential run. Shakir says his mission as chair would be to rebrand the Democratic Party as a party for the working class. Quote, "We are rebuilding trust with people who don't believe the Democratic Party has been there when it matters most to them." Well, we get to have that conversation directly with Faz Shakir. He joins us now. He is the executive director of More Perfect Union, a nonprofit supporting pro-labor journalism and advocacy. Welcome to the table,
Michael.
Mr. Chairman-to-be.
Trying my best.
Trying your best.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
First, you didn't decide to jump into the race until January 15th.
Yeah.
So what pushed you over the edge? And then secondly, have you secured enough signatures to actually be on the ballot?
Yeah, so that I got done in a day. So I got the signatures. We're good there. When I got in, I felt, Simone, about me. I've been waiting for a decade plus for a working class party push. And thankfully, we're now in a moment where a lot of people are talking about it. I'm like, hey, that's good. We're talking about it. So what's the new ambitious idea? And I was feeling let down, Simone, that I don't see anything that would be novel, new, or interesting to working class people who are wondering, hey, you guys at the Democratic Party, did you learn anything? You going to do anything different? And I was let down. So I was like, okay, I have some ideas. I'm going to bring them in and shake this thing up and hopefully earn some people's votes.
How how do you see the job
Yeah.
of chairman? Because the reality of it is, it's going to be
Mr. Chairman,
You see how
please.
he leaned back? He leaned back. He got honey. He said, let me tell you about
Here
being
comes the
chair.
Let me talk to you about being a chair.
Here's the real talk.
So you will have the benefit of not having a president down at 1600 Pennsylvania.
Right.
That changes dramatically what you're able to do. How do you see that that freeing up of your opportunity?
Can I get philosophical with
Sure.
you for a second?
I'd like
In this
philosophical.
moment, we've got crime boss leading the nation. We've got oligarchy. We've got massive wealth and income inequality. Power being doled out to those who have deep pocketbooks. And in a moment of that, people get frustrated with institutions, Michael. They get like, does anybody give a damn about me? Does anyone with integrity run institutions? And most people feel like, no, there's corruption all over the place. No one cares about me. But my case to a lot of people is, you're going to need institutions to fight for working class people. You ain't going to do it alone. You ain't going to take on Zuckerberg, Bezos alone. The DNC is one of two major political parties in America. You got to run this thing with integrity. You got 50 plus state parties. You got $100+ million raised this year. You telling me you can't get ambitious about how you build a grassroots oriented DNC that says we're in service of others, not ourselves. And if you can do that, when you see corruption at the highest levels of our country, I believe you have a chance to expand your membership. Membership right now to the Democratic Party is what? An online contribution?
Right.
Can it mean something more than that? Can we be in service in communities all over the place saying, hey, when you go on strike, when you're organizing your workplace, when you're fighting your utility rate hikes, when you're trying to get your insurance coverage in your LA fire, we are with you. We're part of that. We're of service in a community. I think we can get there, but that's what I'm pushing
So
for.
how do you operationalize that? Like, what does that look like from the DNC member perspective? Because I would also
Right.
note that, yes, an online contribution, but the members and the committee folks across the country.
There's 450 of them.
400, come on now.
Yeah.
All right.
448.
458. He got the numbers. I was about to say, now, do you know? These are the folks that are, they are engaged. They have continued to be engaged through ups and downs, through wins and losses. So how do you operationalize that? And what are you hearing from the members specifically?
Right now, in the Democratic National Committee, if you look at the structure of it, there are no grassroots operations. If you wanted to volunteer right now, Simone, you want to say, hey, I want to be part of the Democratic Party. Is there anything for me to do?
I'm an independent voter right now.
Right. Well, it's fair. Well, if I'm attracting you back, say, come watch the Super Bowl watch party with me and hang out. So do we do anything like that? No, the answer is no. And part of it, the answer is because you're strapped at the state party. If you aren't one of the larger funded state parties and you're a smaller one, you're in Idaho, you're in Nebraska, you don't have a lot of resources to do this. So one of the things you got to do at the national is say, hey, this matters to us. So we're going to have events organizing team and digital organizing team so that when you're a small state, you want to do a Super Bowl watch party or you want to organize it with a tenants union or whatever you're doing on the ground, we're going to help you build an email list, send to that email list, go online to offline organizing, build an event for you on the ground with some national support, because you can't expect a lot of the smaller places, the red areas, to be able to do it.
So let me tell you why what you just said is incredibly important, because that aspect of how you build party and party infrastructure rests not with the Californias, the New Yorks, or more importantly, the battleground states, because they get all the juice.
Correct. That's right.
It is all the other states. It's the other 43 states in the country. When I was national chairman, Illinois got money out of the RNC for the first time when I was chairman. Why? Because it wasn't a battleground state before. But what I did was focus on exactly what you said. If I'm going to build a 50-state strategy, I got to include all 50 states. I just can't focus on the ones that are setting us up for the next presidential run. Right. But I need to have that infrastructure put in place. Why? Because 38 of our states didn't have websites at that time.
See,
And it's the small things like that.
The nuts and bolts. You're getting the nuts and bolts because, like, you can't just sprinkle the dollars out to, like, say, in Idaho, Nebraska, or Alabama, and assume magic is going to happen. They may not even have, the know-how of how to execute an email or events organizing on the ground.
I would know Nebraska. Nebraska does.
But wait,
Jay
Nebraska
Cleb,
does,
that's
but-
Jay.
Can I ask one question though? Fast, people do want to know: are you a Democrat?
Yes.
You are a Democrat.
Yeah, I work for Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, John.
I'm asked. The people wanted to know. I knew
the people wanted to know.
I wouldn't even be Democrat running for national chairman.
Well, people have. Let's just talk about
I'm
what
a
the streets have
frustrated
said.
one, but I'm a Democrat.
If that's the case, guess what I'm doing?
You have a job.
Where's
I asked, are you a Democrat? Because there are folks that when you announced it said, oh, he's not even a Democrat. Why would he want to lead the Democratic Party? And I'm like, well, first of all, do you know for sure that he's not a Democrat? But also, just because you've been critical of the party,
Yes.
I don't think it should disqualify you from participation. But again, what are the members saying?
Simone, right? You criticize out of love. When you feel anger, and I urge people to think this way. You know, when you get angry out there, sometimes the reason you're getting angry is because you really want them to succeed. You really want them to do well. The thing that we have to be nervous and scared of is people don't care anymore. If you don't care anymore, holy cow, you're gone, you know? But if you are angry, if you're upset, if you're critical, it means you have some emotion attached to this. You're feeling let down. Can you come back and talk to me like you care about me? And I think that's the opportunity. I think people feeling let down, which means the emotion's still there. We can get to them.
All right.
There we go.
All right. Bad Shakir, thank
Hey,
you. Thank you.
There
we go. There we
we
go.
will be
I got my
seeing you next
petition for
Thursday. We're going to see you next Thursday because myself, Jen Psaki, Jonathan Capehart, and Luke Russert, we are coming together to host a virtual forum hosted at Georgetown University. You're going to hear from the candidates for Democratic National Committee offices ahead of their leadership elections. Myself, Jonathan Capehart, Jen Psaki, we are going to co-moderate the DNC chairs race. Stick around, scan that QR code.
Joining me now, Democratic strategist and former advisor to the Obama campaign, Amisha Cross, and Brendan Buck, MSNBC political analyst and former press secretary to House Speaker John Boehner. Welcome you to Amisha. Terrio said he wasn't asking for violent retribution, but does that threat remain when you have these leaders calling for revenge? I mean, one follower could interpret it to mean violence. Is Donald Trump prepared for that?
I think Donald Trump is prepared for it. I also think that there's something sinister behind it. One thing that we know about criminality is that those that have committed violent crimes are likely to commit violent crimes again. That's one of the reasons why we try to keep violent criminals detained. But in addition to that, set parameters around them when they are released. With that being said, this is a guy who knows that words have power. You recall, even before January 6th, the Proud Boys were issuing all types of statements where they were utilizing white supremacist violence throughout communities across this country. So he definitely knows that his words have power, as does Donald Trump, who during his last time in office uplifted a lot of the words of people like the Proud Boys.
So, Brendan, the pardons took many Trump allies by surprise. Many Republicans, in fact, have struggled to respond when they're asked about it. Could this have political consequences, not only for Trump, but also lawmakers in the midterms?
Perhaps. I mean, the consequences haven't really caught up to anybody yet. Donald Trump ran on the idea of pardoning these people. But what he did run on more specifically was he was going to pardon the people who were nonviolent. And so much as his own vice president were saying that just days before the pardons. I think it's important to appreciate what Donald Trump said recently explaining that. He said that it would have been too cumbersome to go through all of the cases and figure out which ones were too violent to release. It was too cumbersome. He didn't want to take the time to think about it. Think about whether or not this person was actually a threat to further violence or what they did was so heinous that they shouldn't be released, like injuring police officers. That's how serious or not seriously he's taken this. So, you know, he may act like there was some greater calling what's going on here, but he sort of gave that up when he admitted he didn't even look at these things. He just said, look, if these people were for me on that day, I don't care what they did, let them all out.
Yeah, just letting that sink in for a moment. All of you watching as well. Amisha, let's move to the Trump administration having carried out these very publicized immigration raids. Over 1,100 arrests were made across Thursday and Friday. The mayor of Newark, New Jersey, reacted to an immigration raid in his city Thursday at a local business. He said U.S. citizens were detained. Listen up.
None of these people were rapists or murderers or criminals. The problem with it is that ICE went in there without a warrant. And we can disagree on politics, but what we must agree on is that the thing that separates this country from many other countries around the world is the Constitution of the United States.
So we know about 70% of those arrested Thursday and Friday had criminal records. Does it seem like Trump is keeping his pledge to go after criminals first?
No, it seems like Donald Trump used that as a PR campaign to basically relax the emotions of those who are undocumented or going through the process and have not, been completely granted citizenship yet, to feel as though they were going to be okay. What we're seeing in these raids is that they are no respecters of persons. They are going to restaurants, they are going to stores, they are going to communities that are known to have sizable Latino populations, and they are just essentially rounding people up. There was one case specifically in Newark that the mayor actually talked about where one of the people who actually encountered ICE was an actual was one of our former servicemen. He was a veteran, someone who had documentation, someone who had his ID on him, and ICE acted as though that ID might have been fake. They do not care whether these are actual American citizens or not. And I think that as this continues to happen, we're going to see more and more people get rounded up who are legally in this country who just happen to be of a Latino background.
Brendan, at least one deportation flight was not able to take off because Mexico denied that plane access to land. Will Trump have the resources and the cooperation of other nations, actually, to carry out the mass detentions and deportations that he's promised?
It's absolutely the right question. And I think what you're seeing early on, to Amisha's point, is a lot of activity to get people all spun up, because there are real logistical roadblocks to being able to do what he's talked about doing, mass deportations. While there have been raids here and there, I mean, there are always raids. There were raids in the Biden administration. It's not so easy to just go in, identify dangerous criminals and root them out. They also don't have anywhere to put them. This is going to, if they're actually going to do this, it's going to take a really long time, but it's also going to take a lot of resources from Congress. And it's not exactly clear that they're going to be able to get those. So I think what they're trying to do, I think to Amisha's point, is to scare everybody. It is, one, scare the people who are here, maybe hope that they leave, but also scare people from coming here in the first place. Look, I think if Donald Trump kept his promise to root out criminals who are not here legally, that would be really popular, and I would be all there for that. I think they probably are thinking much bigger than that, and I think they're just going to be building to it. So it's going to be a story that's with us for a long time. It's just easier said than done at first.
I'm going to ask this last question to both of you and ask for your answers in a few words. Brendan, you first, with Jonathan Allen describing Trump's first week as rewarding his MAGA base and settling scores. And he said Trump's flood the zone strategy means that each move gets less scrutiny than it would under a less activist president. Is he hoping that this avalanche makes it harder to push back against specific actions? And do you think it's working?
Absolutely. And it's been a calling card of his forever. It's hard to keep track of whatever he's doing because he'll outrage you with something else the next day. There's a list of things we could talk about he did in the first week that we don't have time to get into. Right. I don't think that's going to slow down anytime soon.
Okay. Last word to you quickly, Amisha.
No, I think that's absolutely true. This is Donald Trump's MO. He likes to open the floodgates, and that's what he's doing. He is not only eradicating a lot of the policies from the Biden administration. He's also going all the way back to Lyndon Baines Johnson. He's hitting you with the unraveling of civil rights, re-envisioning the Department of Justice. These are things that took decades to put into place, and he is essentially watering them down and erasing them within a matter of days.
It's pretty stunning. Amisha Cross, Brendan Buck, good to see you both as always. Thanks, guys.
Republicans from the House and Senate Appropriations Committee have made an opening offer to Democrats as the two parties launch negotiations toward a deal to fund the government before the mid-March shutdown deadline. Congress's top appropriators gathered privately Thursday evening in the Capitol for an hour-long Four Corners meeting. But it's unclear exactly how successful bipartisan talks will be when, according to the New York Times, House Republicans are discussing several strategies to fund Donald Trump's agenda, including making cuts to Medicaid. Now, and those same House Republicans will be down at Trump's Doral Resort this coming week to discuss the contours of the Trump agenda, which is expected to include legislation on the border, energy, and tax policy. Joining us now to discuss, Democratic Congresswoman Sarah McBride of Delaware. Welcome, Congresswoman.
Welcome, Congresswoman. Can we just talk about, in terms of the funding, obviously the president and Republicans in Congress have been very clear that they want to make cuts and to pay for some of the things in their agenda, and they want to slash some of the debt, they say. I don't know what I'm about to tell you is going to slash the debt, but maybe you could tell me. This is from the New York Times. House GOP floats Medicaid cuts and more to finance Trump's huge agenda. Top Republicans are passing around an extensive menu of ideas to cover the cost of a massive tax cut and immigration crackdown. turnaround bill. They could establish new work requirements for Medicaid recipients, bringing in $100 billion in savings. We've heard from Democrats that they're going to protect Social Security and Medicare. Are Democrats going to protect Medicaid?
Absolutely. What we are seeing right now by Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress over the last week, and what we will likely see in the weeks to come, is the great betrayal. They campaigned over the last year on lowering costs facing workers and families. And what we're going to see, and what we are already seeing, is an attempt to line the pockets of Donald Trump's billionaire friends while cutting programs and benefits for working people in this country. We will be defending Social Security and Medicare, and yes, Medicaid. Nearly 1 in 4 Delawareans rely on Medicaid. Those are Delawareans in families living in poverty and Delawareans with disabilities. And instead of cutting this critical program, we should be expanding it and improving it like we've done here in Delaware. When I was in the state legislature just last year, we passed unanimously with bipartisan support my legislation infusing our state's Medicaid program with the largest ongoing source of new resources since the Affordable Care Act to protect it and expand it for the people who rely on it. So we should be moving in that direction, not cutting this program that so many of our constituents rely on.
I think a couple of things that are important to level up in this conversation so that we don't confuse people, because people get Medicare, Medicaid confused. They think it's all the same. But Medicaid is a state program, but the important thing about it is it's health care for the poor. And that's basically what it's monies that are used, as you noted, Congresswoman, for those with disabilities, the poorest in our communities. There are poverty level requirements for this. So the fact that we have Republicans now advocating for the elimination of health care for the poor, that's what we need to be talking about, in my view, and not just framing it as a Medicaid discussion, which is bureaucratic and process-oriented, but putting the real fine points on it, as you noted, how it's impacting and will impact Delawareans, and how, more importantly, what this means for those folks when those programs are cut. I can tell you, just to go off on a little bit, before my mother passed, her Medicaid was cut off 3 times. You know why? Because she was $300 above a $6,000 limit. So that's what we're talking about here. The limits that poor people have to face, that you can't have with so much money in your bank account. And Republicans are now saying you no longer qualify. We want to cut these programs. For me, that, Congresswoman, is the passion in this discussion, not the bureaucracy and the bureaucratic bull that the Republicans want to focus on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Medicaid is different than Medicare. It's administered by the state through a joint contribution between the state and the federal government. And so if you hear the Republicans talking about cutting federal dollars for Medicaid, what we have to be clear about are the real world impacts of those cuts on people we represent. Like I said, 1 in 4 Delawareans rely on this program. That's new moms who are living in poverty, who are already facing a maternal health crisis in this country. Today is National Maternal Health Awareness Day. We have just expanded Medicaid to cover 1 year postpartum for new moms, a critical point in both the lives of new moms and their children. I can't believe that the pro-life party wants to cut maternal health care. We know for Delawareans with disabilities who rely on Medicaid for long-term care, for home health, to be able to get through the day so their parents can go back to work. Even if they're adult children, their parents can go back to work so they can get care throughout the day. This would mean cutting these programs, this coverage, and also making it work less well for providers, which would mean fewer and fewer providers, especially in areas like rural communities and urban communities where so many patients rely on Medicaid for coverage.
It is. I mean, this is the real world impact of these policies. You've recently been named the Democratic Whip of Policy for the House Democratic Caucus, Congresswoman. It's noted that you're going to prioritize lowering costs facing families in the 119th Congress. I know Democrats want to talk about lowering the cost and working with Republicans where they can, but Republicans are talking about all these other things that do not seem aligned with the Democratic agenda. You have the President of the United States issuing executive order after executive order dismantling the long-held policy as it relates to our civil rights, okay, from the 1965 order that created affirmative action and equal opportunity. You have these orders on specifically what he has said about prescription drugs. Now he's rescinded that Biden order. Orders on about trans people. Just what is the Democrats' posture here? And I'm definitely interested in. I'm sure you've had a lot of inquiries this week, given just all the crazy from these executive orders specifically and the chaos they have that has ensued.
As you noted, we will certainly find common ground where we can. That is the responsibility of elected officials, but we will stand our ground when we must. And the last couple of days have been a glimpse into what we will likely see from this administration over the next 4 years. Look, Donald Trump kept pretending like he had never heard of Project 2025, but the vast majority of actions that we've seen in just the last couple of days come straight out of the Republican playbook. They lied throughout their campaign. They said they were going to focus on lowering costs facing families. They're not. They said that they didn't know what Project 2025 is. Well, they're staffing their administration with its authors and already implementing that agenda. The president said on Monday in the rotunda that we were going to be entering a golden age in America. But the reality is that they're taking us back to the Gilded Age. They're taking us back to the 1880s, the 1890s on economic policy, lining the pockets of the robber barons. But they're also taking us back to the 1880s and 1890s on issues of basic rights and freedom in this country. And I believe that as these actions come forward, people will react and respond in a way that will hold the administration accountable alongside Democrats in Congress. And I'm going to be working my heart out over the next 2 years to make sure that Democrats get the majority so that we have a bulwark in the House that is able to protect the financial security of Americans and the rights of our neighbors.
Congresswoman, I know we're getting ready to let you go, but I just want to say this. I need to chill on this kumbaya bipartisan crap, because at the end of the day, here's your headline. Republicans shoot down Democratic request to ditch party line immigration push and write a bipartisan bill instead. Senate Republicans are making it clear they will pursue a border package without Democratic input. They don't want to work with you. They're not going to work with you. They have the House, the Senate, and the White House. Let them choke on that.
You know,
do not help them out because they don't want your help. They're telling you they don't want your help. So y'all need to just come to the table real and understand that the person sitting on the other side don't want you at the table. Get up, take your coffee, and go into another room.
Michael still said when they go low, y'all better go toe to toe.
Let me just say this. I think the American people want to see elected officials be serious and work together.
No, they don't.
But you're right. You're right. They're not doing that. They are not doing that. They've made it clear, from immigration to economic policy and taxes to basic human rights, they have made clear that they are more interested in driving forward a extreme partisan agenda rather than pursuing collaborative, common sense solutions. I totally agree.
All right.
Congresswoman Sarah McBride of Delaware. This is why she's a policy person, because she's like, I got to answer for that.
I know.
Thank you very much,
Thank you
Congresswoman.
for your patience,
We look forward to seeing you again soon. A word on DEI.
Yeah, you know, it's amazing to me how ignorant people are when it comes to this, because basically what Republicans have done is just sort of dropped everything into this one little bucket and claim it all as DEI and claim it all to be bad. But when you look at the burgeoning of civil rights in the 30s, 40s, that culminated in some of the transitional civil rights legislation in the 50s, and ultimately the Civil Rights Act in '64, you begin to appreciate the country's journey on this. Mm-hmm. And in a matter of a day, we have a president who doesn't give a damn about any of it. Just basically go, We no longer, our federal government now can discriminate against the citizens of the country.
In every single aspect. And that's what I don't think people understand, like the equal opportunity order that Johnson put forward in 1965, Lyndon B. Johnson. It created the EEOC office. It was affirmative action. It had to do with contracting. In what universe do people really believe that DEI or affirmative action means people who are unqualified are getting opportunity? The unqualified opportunities I see are happening at the highest levels of our federal
we just
government.
hired a Secretary of Defense.
Thank you, because the president wanted him to, and he was unqualified. Like when you see, and to be clear, white women are the biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action DEI policy. They have been
for the last 30 years.
Talk about them gaps between educational gaps and women in the workforce, white women in the workforce. You better thank President Johnson and affirmative action.
Well, the
veterans, affirmative action, that's DEI, them veteran contracts.
And let's be clear, Art Fletcher, who is the father of modern day affirmative action, during the Nixon years, really sort of crystallizing what you referenced, the sort of the contracting, the business component. This whole idea was for the federal government and for all of us to recognize the opportunity. Let's just create the opportunity. Let's not say, as we're already starting to see now that they've rolled back on these in enrollments at a lot of our major universities, the African American, brown communities, Asian communities, the numbers are slipping because when you're not required to think about it, you don't think about it.
Again, as I said, I know we got to go, but as I said yesterday, how do you account for the fact that we, people of color, women, these people were not in some of these spaces prior to the advent of these policies and programs? It can't be because we weren't qualified. It can't be because we didn't have it can't be because they couldn't find us. Right? They weren't looking for us, okay?
You weren't looking for us.
I just, lastly, Target, I love Target, but they decided to roll back their diversity programming, and part of that programming is making sure that there are people who have opportunities to do business with Target to get their stuff in the stores. So I guess I'm going to be shopping at Costco.
There you go.
Well,
Cost to the go.
Cost to the go.